Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, I have another fantastic guest with us today, live via Zoom. I have fellow veteran, Marine Corps veteran, Chris Kunkle will be joining us, and it's really fun. Chris has also a radio station down at WWDB 860 AM, which is near Philadelphia, and he's the founder and operates Project Chaos. He's also a published author. His most recent book, Victory Over Chaos. Chris, just for fun, because it is the Lima Charlie show, I'd like to start with a radio check. How do you read me over?
Everything sounds great on this end.
Fantastic. Let's start at the like I sometimes refer to. Let's start with the origin story. Tell our listeners about what it was like for you and the decisions that led up to you joining the Marine Corps. How did that come about?
Yeah, sure, Rob. I'm happy to talk about it. I appreciate you having me on. Really excited to be part of your show and really supportive of all the work you've been doing for other veterans. I always say, veterans are the ultimate example of paying it forward. The day we join, we write out a blank check up to and including our lives. And some of us continue that service after. And thank you for yours. It means a lot to me personally. And also means a lot to me. Very proud to see other veterans supporting the community. So thank you on both fronts.
Well, thank you. Back
Um,
at you. Yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah, I'm a Marine veteran, and I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old. And as far as the decision to join, I don't really remember any of that process really occurring like that. And it's funny that you ask. It's not a story that I tell very often, but it's also a story that's rich in a little bit of history that kind of ties in with my bigger story. So, 17 years old, I joined the Marine Corps. Both my parents were in the Marine Corps, my mother and my
Oh wow.
father.
Oh, that's cool.
And I was just talking a little bit about this this morning. I think I incorrectly said both of them went to boot camp at Paris Island. I don't believe my father did. My father, I believe, went to San Diego. I'll have to check with him. But my mother certainly did. Fourth Battalion is where only the female Marines come from is Paris Island.
Hmm.
But both of my parents, active duty Marines, were stationed at Paris Island in the band, if you can imagine. My father was a tuba player,
That's
right?
awesome.
He hated it. And if you know anything about the tuba players of Parasite, it's not where you want to be in the Marine Corps, but it's kind of funny. He was an incredible musician, and that's where he ended up. But anyway, he ends up there with my mother, who's also in the Marine Corps. And I was born at Beaufort Hospital there at Paris Island. So then, fast forward, I'm taking my path through life that we all do as children and whatnot. And I was preparing to go to college. I never really thought about joining the Marine Corps. It was never a desire of mine. And I don't know, we were talking about fate a little bit here before we got on here. I'm not really sure what happened, Rob, but I became very disenfranchised with the world. I developed a bit of a poor attitude. And I wasn't a bad kid. I was a hard worker, but I was just struggling with personal relationships, like with my parents, for example. And essentially, I wanted to get out of Dodge now, I think is what. And like I said, I don't remember real bit, but I just woke up one day and I got to go to the recruiter. And I went to the recruiter and I brought home the brochure. And my father was a very hard worker too, and he would be up and out, dark. And so usually it was a habit of his. He'd come home before dinner. He would take a little nap before dinner. I thought this is a good time to catch. I'm like, damn, I'm thinking about joining the Marine Corps. I slipped the brochure into there, and my father would curse a lot, but he never usually used vulgar words. He threw that brochure at me, and he said, "That's the stupidest. I'll let you fill in the blanks thing I ever heard of." So that is, and this was my mindset at the time. Clearly, this is the right decision. So I joined the very next day. The funniest part about that story of my father, who I love very much, we have a great relationship. Halfway through boot camp, and I'm not having a good time. I mean, who has a good time in boot camp, right? And I call home and I talked to my father. I said, "Do you remember what you told me about it being a stupid idea?" And he says, "Oh yeah, I remember." I said, "You were right." And you know what he said to me? He said, "Well, good. Now you have 4 years to think about it." I appreciate the pep talk there, and
Kick
I
you
know
while you're down. Yeah.
I want to just say this about the legacy of Paris Island a second. It'll tie in as we continue the conversation. But born there, 17 years old, back to Paris Island to attend there. And I remember the day flying out of the MEP Center, Rob. You probably remember too, going to boot camp. And I remember that feeling of joy. I knew I was joining something bigger than myself. And I think for me personally, just something about the Marine Corps. I was born there. I never really thought about it. And if you talk to anybody who knew me when I was in, I was no Mr. Rah Rah Marine Corps. I wasn't like that. In fact, I was a bit disgruntled at times. I was joking on a conversation I was having yesterday. General Mattis, I was talking about, and he admitted there were certain things he didn't like in the Marine Corps. And I was joking. I said, I don't know, I loved every bit of it. Every blissful. That was far from the truth. But as much as I was not Mr. Rah Rah Marine Corps, and I'm probably more now than at any point in my life, rah rah Marine Corps. I respect the traditions and I want to pass that on. But leading up to this, I wasn't. But I think for me personally, Rob, for whatever happened between, being born at Parris Island until age 17, there was just no other option for me. It was the Marine Corps or I was going to go to college.
Yeah.
And I really was very glad ultimately that I made that decision. I asked my brothers one of my favorite questions. Would you do it again? I'll ask you, Rob, would you do it again if you had to serve again?
I think I have to.
I think
I don't,
everybody says that, right?
I don't know how I'd function other than to live the life I've had.
You couldn't be any other way at this point,
No,
right?
no.
Couldn't be any other way.
Can't split
And
the atom. You got to be who you are.
so, so I'm born there. I go back at 17 years old. Here's the remarkable thing, man. I say, you can take the Marine out of the Corps, but you don't take the Corps out of the Marine. 33 years after boot camp, right? So 17 years and just twice as long again. I go back to Parris Island for a reunion with the unit that I deployed with. And I say to myself, how does this happen? How many Marines can say that both their parents were Marines? Very few. How many say they were born at Parris Island? Very, very, very few. And then go back and then deploy and go back there. It was remarkable. And just to get back at my father a second. So we were down at Parris Island with my unit. I said, I would joke around. And I would say, boys, like the tuba, we're watching this graduation, the tuba player, and one of the guys yells out, Dad. And we're in the chow hall. And I said, boys, there's some rumors that I was conceived in this chow hall. We had a good time with it, but it's quite an honor for me. And by the way, not that it's part of your question, but in 2025, the Tun Tavern, the birthplace of the Marine Corps, is going to be reopening in Philadelphia.
Yep.
And there's going to be a joint Navy Marine Corps birthday celebration, parades, flyovers, and my unit where they're going to have a reunion here for that stinking event.
Wow.
I got a phone call. They said, we want you on the call. I walked away, my legs shaking and monumental. So anyway, I really don't know why I joined the Marine Corps, Rob. Just the way it was meant to be.
Yeah, it was natural. That's going to be an incredible event for you. Holy cow.
Wow. It'll be incredible for my family too.
Yeah.
Really
you mentioned deployment, and I know from your book, and of course I've been listening to your show. You have a fantastic show. And again, folks, that's WWDB 860 AM out in Philadelphia. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I know with the book you had it, and you just mentioned your deployment. So tell me a little bit about your travels and ultimately how that tour shaped your career there with the Marine Corps.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Robin. It's a story in itself too, and one that I've been putting together the dots. And I remember when I was getting ready to leave, 17 years old, pimples on my face. I didn't know nothing, right? This tall, lanky, arrogant idiot. Anyways, right? That's my own self-reflection, I had a lot to learn, let's put it that way. But anyway, I was very excited about joining. And I remember a family friend, a neighbor saying, we had been living through a long, extended period of peace. We're coming off the Vietnam era. And there's a couple important things I'd like to say about this, and especially that tie with the Vietnam era, but some other things too. And anyway, we're coming off a long time of peace. Nobody was expecting any conflicts. Not me. I talk about it in my book. I never expected to be in combat, not even like the day before it happened. Right. Right. When they called my name, I was like, what? And we'll get to that too at the travels. But anyway, he said to me, he said, it's a good time to join. In peacetime, you get a great opportunity to travel. And I did get to travel a lot, an awful lot. As a matter of fact, the Marine Corps gave me an opportunity. I've been completely around the globe.
Hmm.
And it's quite a interesting endeavor to do that. But just to give you the story a little bit, I joined the Marine Corps at 17 years old. Really just wanted to get out, leave immediately. I go down to boot camp August, graduate October. I got orders for Motor T School, Camp Johnson, Camp Lejeune. And it was a great, nice support job. I got a ride. I'm not going to be in the infantry. This is the way to go to Camp Johnson, go through my school, very interesting driving school, going to the Marine Corps, and I get orders to go to Hawaii, of all places. This is fantastic. I'm going to Hawaii. I'm Motor T. I'm going to end up on the Air Wing or Brigade Service Support or something like that. No. I end up like in the only grunt unit, I think, first MEB, First Marine Expeditionary Brigade. And anyway, ground combat unit, really in the Marine Corps, the grunt labels, kind of reserved for the infantry, and they deserve that. We had rides, they didn't. And anyway, as we get there, and there was a lot of us new at that time that got to Hawaii. It was just an incredible place to be, very rich with its own history. And the First Marine Expeditionary Brigade, very rich in its own history. I had no idea what an expeditionary brigade was or even meant, Rob. It meant nothing to me. And we get there, and immediately there's a very heavy training cycle, a lot of training, physically, combat readiness. We had a commanding officer. I mean, he would take us on 5-6 mile runs, 7-minute pace the whole time. We had guys that were running marathons. We were up at Schofield Barracks shooting. I pumped out to Guam as part of the maritime prepositioning system. And then finally, a year and a half of this, we pumped out to Okinawa for 6 months. And so now we're in, and I loved it, man. We had a great, I was thinking about going back. And there's actually a photograph of us taken, the Alpha Battery photo, that era, 88 to 92. That is like the pre-deployment photo, if you will. And I was showing my son, who's active duty Air Force, and I'll hopefully get a chance to tie that in as well, what he does. But my son, he's in a special operations unit, and he's a physical dude. And I said, look at our guys and look at how we fill out our uniform. We were you could see how physical we were at that point. We had matured, is my point, but we had no idea. We were going home to Hawaii, and the main thing on our mind was, let's just leave it at R&R. So we deployed to Okinawa, and interesting little tie you just made me think of. I got in some trouble right before we came back. I got in, a corporal came into my room. We were in a squad bay that had some dividers, and I didn't do well in the mornings, and I was lifting a lot, and we were running a lot, and it's achy, tired, and not in a good mood. And it's like 05, and I'm ironing my camis, and this corporal comes and he says, Kunkle, go clean the head. And I was like, all right. And he says, now. And I got a hot iron. I said, listen, as soon as I'm done, I'll go. And this is how I was, right? And he says, I said, now. And one thing led to another, and I laid this guy out. And he goes flying through the door, slams back line, and I come out, and I'm just ready to slam. And I look, and all the platoon sergeants, they just witnessed what I did.
Oh,
and they wrote me up on charges for that.
yeah.
And I had to go in front of the captain. Now, this is about a week before we're coming back from Okinawa. And I go into the captain, and I was so arrogant, by the way. They issued a base order, no more faded camis. Do you know I go into the Chapter 11 hearing with faded camis on? Unbelievable, right? How arrogant I was. The captain, I couldn't believe this happened. He listens to my defense, right? And he looks at me and he says, Kunkle, you're lucky I don't have time for this crap right now. Slams the folder shut and says, case dismissed.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. That got me mess duty. It started. Look at this platoon sergeant, like, this isn't over yet. Anyway, we leave, we come back, Hawaii, and we're back 4 days. All right, so this is now August of 1990, I guess. And 4 days after we're back, the battery gunny's in front of formation. And he says, I don't want to hear anything more about Kuwait. Nobody's going anywhere. I didn't even know, I didn't know what he was talking about. I literally had no idea. I didn't care. I was like, well, how long before our next beer? That's all I want to talk about right now. 4 days after we're back, Okinawa, nobody's going anywhere. 4 days after that, Kunkle, get your gear, grab your weapon from the armory. You're going to Kuwait, right? So I tell you what happened. And I left in advance of the rest of the battery. And I didn't know this all until, not all the details of it. But as I was putting together different pieces, I found, and that training cycle, by the way, I talked about that hard that built a lot of camaraderie. Right? Everybody's angry, and you start working together and you start building a team. What I come to find out, I was listening to this colonel talk from LAVs, same thing at the same time. Then I'm reading General Mattis, what he was doing before the same thing. He was out in 29 Palms. They yanked 1-7 back, call him back out of 29 Palms. We need you guys to stop your training. This never happens.
Right.
He tells the story. I ended up 1-7 is a Marine Expeditionary Unit that was led by the legendary Chesty Puller. This is a unit that has a long, proud history, and they're incredible Marines. I deployed with I wasn't with the MEU, I was with their advance party. When I got to the port of Al Jubair in Saudi Arabia, we were the first Marines on the ground. The only thing there in advance of us was a Patriot missile battery. What I learned later on was that just 50 miles from us was 10 Iraqi divisions, and it was just 100 of us there. But anyway, that was my path there. The maritime prepositioning systems, that's how I ended up on this advanced party. And what got me into that was nothing to do with anything mission related. They came up, they needed volunteers to go to Guam, and you had to fit certain criteria. You couldn't be married. You had to have a certain driver's licenses, and you had to have explosives endorsements. And I had all those things, which was relatively narrow. They said, "Who wants to go to Guam?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I went there twice. We had a blast. And little did I know that was going to get me a ride with Mattis's Marines to deployment. So, and it took me completely around the world. Coming back just to finish the journey, we were in St. Patrick's Day in Ireland, Shannon, Ireland, on St. Patrick's Day, coming home. That was a little crazy. Came back so I flew out of Hawaii to deploy. I know I had left Hawaii many times, went to Japan, but my journey around the world, I left Hawaii. I flew to Singapore. I took a ship from Singapore to the port of Al Jubair in the Persian Gulf. Once we were done there, we flew from the Persian Gulf to Rome, to Ireland, to Maine, to Seattle, back to Hawaii. That was my journey around the world.
Frequent flyer miles, uncollected. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Quite the travel.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and to be part of that unit at that time, holy moly. I mean, no wonder you have all these incredible stories and frankly history that you've put into book form as on top of your podcast and your radio show there. That's fantastic. Um, so you referenced Madison. There's so many leaders. I mean, you were a leader. So I always am curious about so how many years total, I guess, roughly were you in the service now?
Oh, thanks for asking. I was 4 and out, and actually, I didn't even finish my 4.
Okay.
They offered a 90-day early release, I called it, if you had a college acceptance letter, which I forged. And I hope the statute of limitations have been worked out on that. And I got out 90 days early. And because I was deployed so much, I had 2 months of leave saved up, the maximum you could. I cashed in a month, and because I needed the money,
Yep.
and I got out. I used the other month to leave early. And I actually got out a little more than 4 months before so I did a little over 3.5 years net, if you want to get technical about it. But I did fulfill my contract.
Well, I was just curious. I mean, that's a lot of traveling. So it's like that's high tempo, right? That's you're on the move. You're humping. Even with your downtime, you're staying in shape. You're constantly your mind, and all veterans can relate to this. Your mind is at peak performance, right? You're constantly aware that you got to be ready for whatever comes the next morning. So with all the travels and all the different roles you had there, I'm always curious about, we've all had good and bad leaders. There's lessons learned, good and bad. Is there any one particular person or or a lesson that came out of your service that even today you still kind of reflect on?
Well, it's an interesting question too. I didn't have like a magic mentor or anything like that. I didn't have any one person that necessarily, guided me or had some mass impact on my life as far as my Marine Corps experience goes. A couple stories I'll share, and not in any particular order. And the first one we'll get to a little bit later. But my brother Michael, who's not a Marine, he's a good friend of mine. I call him my brother. Has sponsored my show. He's the one that told me to write this book, and he's so well read with military history that he has given me every good idea that's pretty much led to everything we're doing right now. And I really appreciate his involvement. And another guy is Earl Nightingale, who was famous in the personal development industry, called the godfather of personal development. He had the only spoken word record to reach platinum record status. People say we have the same kind of voice. And he was a Marine veteran, joined at 17 years old for much the same reasons that you joined the Army and I joined the Marine Corps, my friend. And he ended up at Pearl Harbor. And I never knew that till after he was dead. But Earl Nightingale, I used to listen to his stuff. And
Wow.
that
I didn't know he was
leadership.
I didn't know he was in the service. Wow.
He's a Marine Corps veteran.
Hmm.
Yep. And so you asked me about the influence on my life. I had to go to a funeral recently. I was putting on my suit. And, for Marines, it's important to us that we represent. In other words, how do you know a Marine when you meet one? Because he's already told you 5 times. It's on the car, it's on his shirt, it's on his hat. I said, we're worse than lawyers with this stuff. You know what I mean? But anyway, I'm going to a funeral of my family there. Everybody's going to know I'm a Marine, okay? And we're going to do it well. And it dawned on me, Rob, I didn't even have a pair of dress shoes till I was in the Marine Corps. I never had a suit. I had a jacket. I didn't know how to tie a tie till I went in the Marine Corps. The biggest story I like to tell is the swim story. All right. When I was 10 years old, I never learned to swim, man.
Hmm.
Never learned to swim as a kid. 10 years old, I was playing in a pool. I slipped, hit my head, ended up unconscious in the bottom of the pool, had to be resuscitated. It was traumatic. I spent 3 days in the hospital. People say, oh, yeah, I almost drowned. Go stand at the bottom of the pool. You'll see what it feels like. All right. You'll see what I mean when I say almost drowned, okay? I had water in my lungs, another minute down there, and I was going to be kaput. And by the way, I still remember the whole experience vividly today. So that's how it impacted me. Well, I joined the Marine Corps at 17 years old on a whim without giving that decision very much thought. And some people may know that there's a swim test associated with these amphibious warriors. And it's a simple test. You got to tread water for 8 minutes without touching the sides of the bottom, made slightly more difficult by the fact that you have to do it while you're wearing your uniform. And I couldn't do it without a uniform, let alone with a uniform. But I just said, you know what? I could do anything for 8 minutes. I didn't care. So I jump in the pool and I'm flailing around and help. and the drill instructors, if you can believe this, they didn't offer much help at all. As a matter of fact, they were very unhappy with this.
Wait a minute.
So
Hold. Let me just pause the story, Chris. Are you telling me that a Marine Corps drill instructor didn't sit down, give you a cookie, and talk about your feelings that day?
no, I don't
No.
recall that. Actually, you know what he said? He said it's the Twinkie generation. One thing the Marine Corps has asked of you, and you failed. Get over in the corner. So,
Sure.
and we go back. Nobody says anything to me. It's not like they, like you. There was no explanation at all. You failed. That's all you get out of that. Like the next step can't be good. So anyway, a couple days later, a little short bus comes and they read off the names. Get your gear, go. And I'm thinking, man, they're sending me to the discharge platoon. And Rob, as much as I was unhappy with my decision to join and I hated boot camp, I did not want to go out. It was not an option for me.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I said, man, I don't know how I could face my family. Like, I can't fail at this. They didn't take us to discharge us. They took us back to the pool. And they had instructors there, and they were a little different than the drill instructors, and the tone changed. And it was not cookies and milk, I can tell you that. Drill instructor stood in front of us, and you want to talk about impact on my life. It was that guy. I don't even know his name. He said to us, he said, listen, if you listen to me, you'll be able to swim and you'll be able to do it well. I was like, for the first time in my life, cocky. I was like, I'm listening. And they took us through the basics, Rob. And I'll just say this, after all that, I did go on to pass the test, obviously. Went on to become a great swimmer. And two quick things I'll tell you about that. And I will ever be thankful for what the Marine Corps did for me, teaching me how to swim. We were out, as I said, I got stationed in Hawaii. We were out swimming on basic K-Bay, and the water there can be very dangerous. We got in trouble I got pulled out in a rip current. I was able to get myself back. The most difficult, grueling physical thing I ever did. I collapsed on the beach. I was out swimming another time with a buddy of mine who would go out with Marine recon units, right? Incredible swimmer. He got caught in a rip, had to be rescued, came back crying.
Mm.
And so I was able to develop better swimming than that guy. My son, we were up, you're from New York, you might appreciate this. We were up at Upper Lake Saranac, which is up near Lake Placid.
Sure.
And there's an island out there, Big Buck Island, that you can go camp on. A couple miles out, you canoe out. It's just, it's like being in Western wilderness on the East Coast, right? And we go out there. Well, anyway, off of Big Buck Island is Little Island, Little Buck Island. It's a couple hundred yards out. Now, these are navigable lakes. And my son wanted to swim out there. I said, no, no, no. Finally, we did it. He was about 10 years old, about the same age I was when I drowned. We have the photograph. It was just an incredible experience that has led to his own path. So that swim experience was transformative for me. But in terms of people impacting me, every one of those men impacted me. The leadership, I will tell you, the quality of these men, and I think it's part of my struggle today. I say it to some of my friends who didn't experience it, they can't get it. I get so frustrated with what I see civilians and the lack of integrity, the lack of principles, and being able to handle things. When I can't stand, I don't know what to do. Figure it out, man. We don't have time for this. And you'll see people lead. Well, it's complicated. Figure it out. And I'll just say this. It was the most incredible leadership. And I think that, and we were hard on them, Rob. If you would have asked me 30 years ago, I think I probably would have had a couple different things to say. But to this day, the respect for our leaders is amazing. And, I proudly say that. I really do. The era that I was fortunate enough to serve in was really lucky. And all of our services, I think, at that time were just at the highest level of readiness, really. And a lot of it was the quality of that leadership. And those, I love talking about the teamwork, the leadership. And I like talking about it now because the world needs to hear it. I hear the business struggle. There's solutions to this. And I'm really grateful for the impact. I like to say that, deploying in combat, war is a failure of humanity that we have wars at all. And as much as sometimes people want to despise the warriors, we never declared a war, never once. Okay, we don't start them. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But as much of a failure as war is, through all that, I got to see the best of men, and I'm really proud of that and thankful for that opportunity.
Yeah, agreed.
Appreciate you
It's a special group of folks, I'll tell you. So
it is.
So that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Now, when you got through your 4 years and you hit some burn, leave to, you burned some saved up leave time there. Was that did you have an actual plan to transition out? Was there kind of a strategy that you had in mind, or were you just kind of gonna figure it out as you went? How did that transition go for you? And I guess what I'd really like to hear also is how that transition got you to where you are today and how things are now. What was that fun leap hopscotch like for you?
I'll tell you, your questions are great, Rob. I really appreciate that. It's amazing what it triggers, things I hadn't thought about in quite some time. Yeah, my plan was to. My father grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, worked like a dog his whole life. Framed houses for a while, and ultimately built a career in real estate development and owned his own businesses and so forth. But he used to constantly tell me, work with your brains, not your brawn. And this is very common. Go get a college degree, in other words. Work smarter, not harder, which I do believe in that very much. So when I got out, it was my plan. I was like, I need to go do the thing I was supposed to do after high school and go to college. And that's what I did. I did, like I said, I forged that acceptance letter, but I did go to college then, as was my plan. I didn't need the 90 days to do it. I just wanted to get the heck out of there. The Marine Corps wasn't preventing me from going to college.
Right.
And by the way, there's another opportunity that came through the GI Bill.
Mhm.
Um, but anyway, I came home and I went down to the local community college and I enrolled. And my passion at that time was construction and architecture. And I went and signed up for architectural design program and started that process. And I really struggled, Rob. And I remember from the very first day I walked in there, I walked by the cafeteria and I was taken aback by what I witnessed. We matured so much,
Mhm.
you know, and I, I couldn't relate to the professors. I couldn't relate to the people there. And after about a semester, I dropped out, and in big part because I got a great job at an engineering firm. And the guy that I started working with was very regimented. My brother Michael, you heard me mention about.
Mhm.
Um, I met him right after I got home from the Marine Corps, and we remain close today. And he's been supporting this work and very support. His father was an Army veteran, and he comes from a family of veterans. But I landed that job working for that firm, which launched a whole career for me. I ended up owning my own architectural firm and owning several of my own businesses after that. So, it was a very non-traditional path. And I'll say this too, for younger veterans who might get a listen to this, I never did enough to capitalize on my veteran uh, benefits. I never even used up my GI Bill. And even my veteran connections and things like that. And I gave something up in doing that. I wish I would have, but ultimately, I will say that the experience that I gained in the Marine Corps, especially on the leadership and discipline end, it served me really well as I went out into the work world and what I could provide for employers. And I think veterans, bring a special treat for that. Having said that, Rob, it's never been easy for me. Any juncture, like a lot of other people. And you and I were talking about this a little bit before the show, and our gun name was War Pigs. And I say, you know what? I just come to realize I like it dirty. I need to be messy. If things are going too well, it's boring. You know what I mean? That's my story anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sticking to
Smooth,
it.
smooth, even pavement. That's not as fun, you know. You got to have a few bumps there. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, well, that's great. Well, tell me about, you got this new book. Talk to me about that, the radio show, the project, and don't be bashful. Our listeners, just like I'm sure your listeners, we love to support and learn more about veteran stories and see what we can do. So if you have a website you want to mention or anything like that, just let's have at it.
All right. Well, I like to tell stories. There's two big things I'm passionate. Well, three. Well, there's a lot of things I'm passionate about. But in this realm, I love the gift of oration. Part of that is storytelling, and I enjoy being able to tell stories. So I'll tell it in a story fashion because I do believe that it is quite an epic story. But I also believe that our country right now desperately needs to hear the truth, the real, authentic truth. And all that ties very much into this story. So we go back to Paris Island, as I mentioned, for this reunion with my unit, which was just, I mean, extraordinary for me, legendary, very emotional, just being part of it with them. And we go to this banquet dinner and there's a a featured speaker, and it was one of our platoon commanders, and incredibly popular guy. As a matter of fact, I have a chapter in here. I put a story about him because he was so incredible as a leader. You mentioned about the leader. This guy is just a real Marine's Marine, and he stayed in after the Marine Corps. He went Army. I think Lieutenant Colonel or Colonel he rose to. He may still be. I think he still may be on some kind of maybe reserve duty. I'm not sure. Anyway, he goes to the banquet dinner and he's going to speak to us. Now I'm there. I took the road trip down with my brother Michael, who I said, been very much tied to my military service since I got out. We have a mutual friend down there we were going to visit, and my brother traveled with me to be part of this. So he was at this banquet dinner with me by chance, right? And this speaker comes in, very popular, and he talks about the story of Kafji, the Battle of Kafji. And I'm going to tell you the story in a second because it's a big story, I think. And I think it'll resonate with a lot of veterans for sure. And people, it'll create a different awareness. And he tells a story at Kafji and he gets done. And I said, man, he did a really great job laying it out. I mean, we were all there. He was there. And I thought, but there was a lot of details. And I realized in all this after the fact that each of us had a little different perspective. I was talking to a brother of mine yesterday. I was on gun 1. He was on gun 8. We were a half a mile away. I mean, that's like on the other side of the planet in that realm. And we saw different things in the course of that. Anyway, my brother, my respected, platoon commander gets up there and gives this speech. And I'm thinking to myself, there's something I want to add to this story. Now, I mean, I got out as an E4. I spent most of my career as an E. I got meritoriously promoted to E2, and it was like, I just sat at E3 for terminal lance was the term we used back then. I did make it to E4, but I'm pretty proud of that. Anyway, long story short, we don't get up and interrupt the colonel. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Sir, I'd like to add a few things. Like, sit down. So, anyway, I'm kidding around about that, but it was important to me to respect this man. I meant that sincerely. I would have shut up before I disrespected him. And I want to make sure, I was like, I got to make sure I handle this right. Well, I felt that I did. I got up and I made my comments and I sat down and forgot about it. I really did. And we're on the way home. And my brother, Michael, who's encouraged me to all this, he says, man, you got to write that story down. I tell him no. He tells me 3 times. And here we are. And so let me tell you the story. The U.S. Marines battle for Kafji. And the internet version goes like this, all right? They're going to say that on the night of January 29th, 1991 at 2000 hours, 3 Iraqi mechanized divisions approached Kafji under surrender, turned and attacked the city. And through coalition air power, and the Saudi forces were able to reclaim the city from the Iraqis. And while that story may be technically true, it is completely inaccurate about what happened there. I was on guard duty the night that Kafji got hit, and the ground war that had not yet begun. Let me just tell you what we experienced. After New Year's, leading up to, we deployed over there in August. I said we were the first 100 over there to be a speed bump, and then we waited, through the holidays to hurry up and wait. And all that ended around Christmas. Stuff that started getting a little nasty, and fires starting, stuff blowing up. Then they announced the air war started after New Year's with the American. We're listening to it on BBC. No ground war though. And that was funny because every night we're getting shelled by Iraqi artillery. Well, I guess it's not a ground war if you're not engaged, returning fire, which we couldn't do because they had longer range than us. Every night, we're incoming. And, we're getting it. Now, luckily, they couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. And, we never took any direct hits from any of that. And then, if you can believe this, before the ground war began, we were running fire missions up along the border. Go figure, right? But the ground war hadn't begun. And what we would do, and we love this stuff, man. And it's a story in itself. So we're getting hit with this artillery. We get the call. They want us to sneak up to the border at night. Now, you're in an open desert, okay? We're going to go into the cover of darkness with an 8-gun, 155 millimeter artillery battery. You can't use any lights. You couldn't even light a cigarette, okay? You can't make any noise. Everything was wrapped in tape. This has all got to be done silently. No noise, no light. Easy peasy. Yeah, because we trained for it a million times. And that's exactly what we did. So now we're already on the edge of their range, and we're going to move in close, like right under their noses, right? Sneak up there, wait for the coordinates, and fire off those rounds. Now, as soon as you fire, you got to get the heck out of there, and you better move fast because now they know where you're at. And those were incredible, man. And one of the things about artillery, if you take the projectile, these things, they're pretty benign. You could probably drop it, bang it, put it in a fire for all I know, and it would take a lot. But once it's fused, it becomes volatile. And so it's a big no-no. You don't pre-fuse a lot of rounds, and you don't move them when they're fused. Well, because we didn't know what we were going to be firing until the last minute, and there was no time, we had everything pre-fused. And then we had to get out of there. We just threw them up on the back of the truck and go, man. And it was just a rush because they're hitting us night after night. We're getting smoked. And they're like, you want to hit back? Yeah. We were right up there and do that. No ground war had begun, keep in mind. Now, we were the first ones there, and we were with the 1st Marine Division, but and I forget what task force we were assigned to, um, Shepherd or Taro, I forget. But anyway, we were in the coastal sector along the Persian Gulf, and that was the Arab coalition sector. And we were mainly there to provide fire support to them and Mattis's Mew that was sitting on a ship in the Persian Gulf, potentially to make a beach landing into Kuwait, which did not happen. But the bottom line is we were a small number of Marines in this Arab coalition there to support them, okay? Now, it's true, 3 Iraqi divisions, and if you know how big a division is, that's a hell of a lot of military assets. They come down into Kafji, and they at the last minute, they don't surrender. They attack the city. And when they did, the Arab coalition that we were there to support, these are Saudi forces, Qatar, Egyptians, they all turned and ran in epic fashion. Now, we don't know what's going on. All of a sudden, the radio goes hot, the sky is glowing orange like that, okay? And all of a sudden, there's a massive convoy. We don't even know. Some of those, there was a problem because you got A-10s coming in now responding to calls for airstrikes, and they don't know who to strike. This is a big, big problem, what they did to us. And they deserted us in the process. You understand? We're a small group of Marines there to support them. And the minute that it kicks off, they're like, we're out of here. We're like, out of here. So we were about 6 miles outside of the 6 to 8 miles, I would estimate, outside of the city, maybe a couple of miles off the Persian Gulf. So what do? Well, 2 Marine teams got trapped inside that city, and 2 Army trucks got trapped inside that city. I want to say this very proudly. They came down, they asked for volunteers from the Marine Corps to go in and get the trapped personnel out. Every single one said yes, not one bit of hesitation. And that's the key difference, so you understand that all these other forces just turned and ran away. We ran in without any hesitation at all. We moved up closer to the city that night, just behind this hill overlooking the city. Now, you've got tanks and armored personnel carriers. They're shooting at each other. There's air sorties going on left and right. And we got Marines trapped in the city. There's a video out. I reference it in the book. It's out on YouTube. A guy named Corporal Ingram. I knew Ingram. Ingram was a forward observer. You got to hear this freaking story, man. It's nuts. Ingram's on a rooftop inside the city. He was the guy that was calling in the airstrikes for those raid missions that we were going up smoking the Iraqis. Well, they knew that. They figured that out. And Iraq was taking a big gamble with this strike. They figured if they could take some American casualties or maybe some American POWs, it would have been gold for them. They wanted heads, all right? They send 3 divisions inside of this little city. The air power took out everything outside of the city. It was just mass carnage everywhere. We drove through all that. But inside the city, they weren't able to strike the same way. They locate Ingram's team. This is the story now. There's a couple of different accounts why. And this part of the story actually ended up in Generation Kill, all right? I'm not promoting them, so if you want to go find that out, you can. Right. But it does add credibility to what happened. There's a little difference. Now, Ingram's on the roof, and they're surrounded by Iraqis. Now the Iraqis are in the stairwell. He tells the story in the video. They burn their crypto, and he says something critical. He says, I don't know about anybody else, but I was getting ready to fight out. I wasn't being taken alive. And I had that same thing happen. I could tell you it was broadly agreed amongst the Marines at that time. We were only leaving if we won. It was the only way we were leaving. And there's something about that that becomes very powerful. And that was the same that day. Ingram's trapped. They're in the stairwell. Now, imagine you're the Iraqis, because this situation is going to take a big change right now. Ingram's up there puckering up, right? Got locked and loaded, ready to fight down off this doggone roof with tanks and armor surrounding the building. He calls for fire. Now, there was a story going around that it was an inaudible call because there was this click, 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 which is just ominous, all right? I don't think that occurred. I think it was a verbal call for fire. But he didn't call for the air power that supposedly saved the city. Why not? I don't know. I didn't talk to him about it, but I know this probably because he couldn't wait. He couldn't wait. He needed that round now. So with artillery, you're firing at that point, we're firing at 4 mile range. Okay. So normally you'll fire a spotter round and adjust to the target because it's not exactly precise. The Iraqis are in the stairwell. Ingram makes the call. Gun 2 sends a round downrange, and it goes through the hatch of the armored personnel carrier. Now, imagine you're the Iraqis. You're getting ready to take some prize, and all of a sudden you're like, what? And Ingram says, fire for effect. And he tells the story. I've seen the photographs of it, and they have in Generation Kill the Humvees that were shot up. We shot up those Humvees. That was our artillery that hit that with our ICM rounds and took out those Iraqis, and we were able to get those Marine units out, and the Army units were able to be extracted as well. And, it was a real turning point for us because they call artillery the kings of battle. And we had a lot of confidence. We wanted to fight, and we had a lot of confidence because we had good leadership, we had great training, and we had everything we needed, all the ammo, all the equipment, all the combined support, air, tanks, you name it. I drove a truck, ammo for the artillery battery. When we would move, we would have helicopter escorts, sometimes from the Army, Rob, that would provide that combined support for us. Everything, and because of that, we had great confidence. They call artillery the kings of battle, and after Kafji, the whole thing turned. We were getting hit. We were tired. We were like, nobody can beat us, and that was the beginning of our tour. But here's the part I wanted to say about that, and one more quick tie. I won't go on too long. Corporal Ingram, the forward observer on that rooftop. My son is TAC P in the Air Force. This kid graduates Westchester University cum laude. He comes to me and says, I hope you're not going to be upset. I'm going to join the Air Force. I said, bro, I don't call him bro. Hey, it's not my decision. I never thought of you joining the Marine Corps, and the Air Force sounds like a great thing, and he loves it. I'm happy for him. And he's beat me in every way, by the way, and some other Marines. TAC P is a very tough school. And the final schoolhouse, there was a Marine recon captain in there. And my son got top grad beating out the Marine captain. I'm so proud of him.
That's awesome.
He's an incredible man. He has jump wings. But anyway, TAC P is essentially the same job that Ingram has that my son's doing. What are the chances of that? So, but anyway, my point about telling that story and setting the record, and that's what this book is about, and quite a bit more. And when I walked away from Parris Island and that talk, which started this whole journey, I realized how important it is that we get the truth out, Rob. And I know you know this. And for the first time, I think just a switch went off. I had no hesitation in the way I presented and told. I just all of a sudden I had the confidence I needed to go say, and it's hard to explain that. And so even I told my brother no, that I wasn't going to write it. We did write this book, Victory Over Chaos. If I had to say, what is the book about? Of course, it's about the Battle of Kafji. And if you enjoyed that little story, I think you enjoy reading the whole book and some of the other stories. It's really fascinating. But the book is really about tenacity. And I think that it's inspiring to read it. It really is. I have a chapter. I pretty much hit all the big stuff. Post-traumatic growth. I talk about PTSD in the chapter. I talk about the weapons of mass destruction and what happened there. Pretty fascinating. And, what it takes to win wars and this mentality of the Marine Corps. And I think it's a very inspiring story. And it restores our legacy of what we actually did there. How are we going to come home and you're going to tell us that the guys who deserted us are the ones that won the battle? And then you try talking, you're like, oh, wasn't that the Nintendo War, the 2-Day War or whatever? You're like, what are we talking? You're talking about the same thing. And, Rob, here's the thing to carry this, what it's turned into. I wrote the book. I'm waiting on the publisher, and this whole process. The editor had it, and so there's kind of a delay there. And I started, for my own general interest, doing more research into other Marine battles. And I'm sure it's the case with other services too, but just my interest has been the Marine battles. Mm-hmm. And you know what I found? They lied about every single one of them. I told you I had an opportunity to interview James Bradley, the author of Flags of Our Fathers, which later became a movie. And his father was on Iwo Jima, the flag raising. Do you know? And by the way, his father was a Navy corpsman. He wasn't even a Marine. True story. But did you know that those there was only 3 of those flag raisers that even made it home alive. I never knew that. Jesus, right? Never wanted to talk about it. But here's the point I wanted to make. I talked to James Brown. That's an incredible interview we're offering on Project Chaos, which I'll tell you about in a second, which was born out of this book, Victory Over Chaos. Talking to James Bradley, and I go do some research after the fact. 23,000 Marines died on Iwo Jima. James Bradley said something to me. He said, Chris, imagine trying to attack the Washington Monument while there's 2,000 Japanese riflemen inside it. That's what they were dealing with. I go back and I do some research, and the official account says that once the Marines could get their act together and probably properly coordinate with naval gunfire and tank support, they were finally able to take Mount Suribachi. What? I read the accounts from the commander. They didn't get proper naval gun support, and they couldn't get the tanks on the beach because they got stuck in the mud. They didn't have any armor support, and those Marines were ruthlessly gunned down. And then they're going to say that the Marines couldn't get their act together to get it right. But here's the thing, Rob, and why it's so important that we talk about this. So I said that I benefited from the Vietnam era veterans. They saw what happened in Vietnam. They knew what had happened in the World War II campaigns. And they finally said, never again. They fixed it. That's why I'm able to sit here and speak about all this. Schwarzkopf, Colin Powell, and screw the politics a second. I'm just talking about war fighting and what they did for our military. They were exempt. They fixed the problem. They knew what the problems were. And everything I told you, the combined arms support, the working together, having everything you need, the proper training, all those things are essential. And guess what? We don't have it anymore. They've taken tanks and artillery away from the Marine Corps. And then they're going to call them to go to an Iwo Jima or whatever, and they're going to get slaughtered. And they're going to blame it on the Marines again. And as much as I can, Rob, I'm not going to let it happen. The least we can do is bring the truth of it. And that's my passion, brother. And I have some experience broadcasting and speaking a lot. And I told you I was inspired by Earl Nightingale and his voice. And so I write the book. I always kind of wanted to be in radio. And we had plans to launch a podcast around this book. And on my birthday this year, I got a call. Hey, we got a radio spot for you. And I was like, about as much as I planned joining the Marine Corps. I was like, I can't say no. And projectchaos.org is the website. And I appreciate you allowing me to come here and talk about it. The best thing, any veteran, please go visit the website, projectchaos.org. My book is pre-selling right now. It is available on my website for sale. And I think Barnes & Noble has it for pre-sale right now. But the only place you can get a printed copy at this particular moment is from my website, projectchaos.org. And but very soon it'll be out on all the retailers. Victory Over Chaos. I appreciate the support for the book. And the weekly radio show, we're doing interviews with veterans, Rob, same as you. And like I said, I'm looking forward to hopefully an opportunity to maybe do this in reverse with you too.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be a fun one. Yeah. Well, Chris, this is all great stuff. I love your passion for this, and you couldn't have said it any better. I mean, if we don't get the real facts of our history to be understood by the masses, or at least within the military itself, then we are doomed to repeat the worst mistakes over and over. So I really love what you're doing. Now, we'll have links and things on our site and our socials. So, folks, if you're listening to this, if you didn't have a chance to jot down the sites that Chris mentioned, you can always look underneath this, whether on YouTube or whatever. You can find everything for him along with his bio. But as far as the book, which website did you say for folks who want to pick up a copy? What's the best way right now?
Projectchaos.org.
Projectchaos.org. Okay, yeah, we'll make sure we do that. So yeah, this is great stuff. Thank you so much for sharing this story. I do have one. You got time for one more fun question?
Sure.
I kind of enjoy the idea of time travel. I don't know why. It's just something I've always kind of,
You enjoy that idea? What?
Time travel. Yeah. So yeah, it's just kind of a funny little. I don't know. I'm a Star Wars fella, and I think if I was joining the service now, I might be really interested in this whole Space Force thing. We'll have to see where that goes, but here's a fun question I always ask, and there's no wrong answer, obviously, but if you had an opportunity, knowing what you know now, and living the life you've lived. And of course, you have so many chapters ahead of you, but just from today, if you had a chance to go back and you could only talk to yourself, like your younger self when you're 17, living at home, and you decided you're going to join the Marine Corps, if you had just a moment or two to talk to your younger self, younger Chris, right before he goes off to basic training there, what would the message to him be? What type of guidance, warning, or even just a commentary? What would just a moment or so of your, had you known then what you know now, what would you share with him?
Oh man, it's the story of my life, Rob. Thanks for asking, man. It's a story very personal to me. Um, when I joined the Marine Corps, like I said, it was a very rich heritage. I felt this desire to do well with it. I felt I was joining the best, and that means different things in different contexts. So I say that carefully around other veterans. But we were the best at what we did, our amphibious warfare for sure. I respect the Army, the Air Force. My son's unit is incredible. Our Navy is incredible. But as far as amphibious fighters, or the Marine Corps takes that title, I believe, and I wanted to be part of that. And when I got in, it was a lot less, a lot more uncomfortable than I expected, as I said. But when I got out into the fleet, especially, um, some of the guys with the bad attitudes, they got in my head, man. And I convinced myself that the Marine Corps sucked. And I developed a bad attitude because of it. And then when I got out, I basically slammed the door and told everybody to go pound sand. I didn't keep in touch with anybody. I didn't talk about it. And I talked to James Bradley about this. I said, why do you think Marines don't talk about it? He said, well, it's all the carnage that they witness. I said, well, I didn't witness carnage on the scale of Iwo Jima. So that's not the case. That's not why I wasn't talking about it. And then we kibitzed a little bit. Maybe it was some of the things that they engaged in. I said, I didn't do any of that. Rob, we were going through some of the blown up convoys with the dead Iraqi. I wouldn't look, man. I never touched any of those bodies. I never went around it. I would never desecrate the dead. I did nothing wrong in that regard. That's not it either. Not what it is. So why wasn't I talking about it? Well, I know the answer to that. When I got called back to that 30-year reunion, the reason, I had to, really do a little self-analysis to figure this out for why did I do this? Like, why did I abandon it? These are guys I never would have, we could have gotten blown up. I would have never even hesitated. But somehow I come home and done. I'm out. Why? What was it? And I realized that after I thought about it, it was me. I was embarrassed that I didn't do my best around people who were extraordinary, who expect the best of everybody. And here's the point about all that. So 30 years later, my brothers plucked me out of that. Come on back, right? I go back, and the night of the reunion down there in Washington, this is a 30-year reunion, our first reunion since we had deployed.
Hmm.
And I'm talking to some of the platoon sergeants, and I told them this. And I said, I want to apologize. And they said, Chris, we all feel that way. Everybody felt like they could do better. So my mantra is this, and one thing I learned out of that, I'd say to you, Rob, I made a decision. Never again in my life will I ever not commit everything of the best of myself to it. If I'm going to do it, it's going to get the best version of me, always. And I had already figured that out. It just took me a little bit to process it. So what's the point of all that? If I was going to give advice to my younger self, it's the same advice that I give to everybody I talk to. Avoid temptation because it's a trap. It'll kill you. Do the right thing and do the best you can. And everything will work out just the way it's supposed to. And that's where the name chaos comes into play. Because look, I make a joke, I use a couple of jokes. I was motor T. I always said, anybody can drive the vehicle forward. You need to be able to back up a trailer full speed. And we train to do that, by the way. Okay. Now, sometimes we say in the Marine Corps, anybody can do it sober. Let's see you run 5 miles hungover. All right. That's the point about the chaos, right? It's easy to do the right thing and do the best you can when you've got 3 square meals and plenty of rest. Is when it gets hard, when things get chaotic. And you set that foundation. This is who I am. This is what I'm going to be. We decide that. Nobody else. We decide what we're going to be, what kind of person we're going to be. And I made a conscious decision that as long as I'm alive, it is going to be one that I will be the best I can. And that would be the advice I would give to and by the way, I know it happens to you too. I got a beautiful email from a friend who's completely negative about everything I'm doing. You know what I did? Delete. I understand that sometimes well-meaning people say stupid things, and I recognize it pretty quickly. I don't have any time for it.
Yeah.
But
That's why there's a delete button. Yeah,
and
yeah.
by the way, this is a very important part of this. People, I used to have a friend. I said, "Hey, how you doing?" He always said, "I never had a bad day." He was a devout Christian. I respect. I said, "Never had a bad day." My mother died when I was 12 years old. I got pulled out of a pool at 10. I ended up in a war at 17. I've had a couple of bad days, right? I don't have this, magical positive attitude. I'm not always happy. Matter of fact, a lot of times I'm not. So I say it's not about having a good attitude. It's about having the right attitude, and it's one of doing your best. And that's the advice I would give to my younger self, brother. Thank you for asking.
I love it, Chris. That's fantastic advice. That's awesome. Well, folks, once again, I've had the honor and privilege and just absolute joy talking today with Marine veteran Chris Kunkle. You can check out all of his projects. He's got the website he mentioned. He's on the radio. He's got this new book. So show him some support. Maybe pick up a copy and stay tuned and follow him because you're going to want to watch his next chapter, his next mission, I'll say. You're going to want to stay tuned. And Chris, in your honor, right after this, I have a fun little song just for you. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see what the future holds. We'll be standing by anxiously and paying attention to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Rob. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate it.
Thank you,
Semper
folks.
Fi.
Semper Fi. There you go, folks. Here's a fun song in Chris's honor, and I'll talk to you right after the break. Stand by.